April 28, 1945. Berchtesgaden, Bavaria. Obergefreiter Klaus Hartmann sat in what remained of his foxhole, staring at the small brown cardboard box he'd taken from a dead American soldier 3 hours earlier. His hands trembled, not from fear of the advancing U.S. 3rd Infantry Division, but from hunger that had become a constant, gnawing companion for the past 8 months. The box was labeled U.S. Army Field Ration K, with a meal designation he couldn't read through the grime. Hartmann knew the stories. Every German soldier did. American rations were propaganda items, designed to look abundant, but actually containing inferior food meant to deceive enemy troops. His officers had shown them examples during training. The Americans wanted Germans to think they were well-fed to damage German morale. It was psychological warfare, nothing more. "Don't eat American rations," his company commander had warned in February. "They contain drugs to make you docile. The abundance is false. It's designed to break your will to fight." Hartmann looked at his own rations, what remained of them. Half a piece of hardtack biscuit, rock hard and tasteless. A small tin of artificial honey made from coal derivatives that smelled like petroleum. That was his allocation for 2 days. He'd already eaten the other half yesterday. His stomach had stopped growling days ago, replaced by a dull, constant ache that made thinking difficult. Around him, the sounds of American artillery had grown closer. His unit, what remained of the 99th Mountain Regiment, had been in continuous retreat for 3 weeks. They'd started with 800 men. Perhaps 80 remained, scattered across the Bavarian Alps, many too weak from hunger to walk more than a few kilometers daily. Hartmann opened the American ration box with shaking hands. Inside, a can of chopped ham and eggs, crackers wrapped in wax paper, a fruit bar, candy-coated chocolate discs, instant coffee, sugar tablets, cigarettes, chewing gum, and toilet paper. The amount of food in this single box, intended for 1 American soldier for 1 meal, exceeded everything Hartmann had eaten in the past week. He opened the ham and eggs can with his trench knife. The smell hit him immediately. Real meat, real eggs, preserved in gelatin. His mouth watered uncontrollably. He took a small bite, expecting the drug-laced propaganda food his officers had warned about. The taste exploded in his mouth. Real ham, real eggs, not ersatz, not substitute, not coal-derived imitation, actual food made from actual ingredients. Hartmann began crying as he ate, tears mixing with the first protein he'd consumed in weeks. Within 5 minutes, he had consumed the entire box, eating chocolate for the first time in 4 years, drinking real coffee made from real beans instead of roasted acorns. 2 hours later, when American troops from Company C, 7th Infantry Regiment reached his position, Obergefreiter Klaus Hartmann surrendered without firing a shot. He wasn't the only one. Of the 80 remaining men in his battalion, 73 surrendered that day. Most had discovered American rations in abandoned positions or taken them from supply dumps. Most had eaten them despite orders and warnings, and most had reached the same devastating conclusion. If America could feed its frontline soldiers this well, Germany had never had any chance of winning. What Klaus Hartmann didn't know, what no German soldier fully understood until they tasted it themselves, was that American food abundance wasn't propaganda, it was industrial reality. The U.S. military supplied its troops with 4,000 to 4,500 calories daily, even in frontline positions. German soldiers, when they received rations at all, were subsisting on 1,500 to 2,000 calories daily by 1945. The difference wasn't just numbers. It was the physical manifestation of industrial capacity so overwhelming that even feeding soldiers became a weapon of war. In the final months of World War II, German soldiers surrendering in the thousands would consistently report the same experience. They had encountered American food, realized everything they'd been told was a lie, and understood that fighting an enemy who could waste food was pointless. The sea ration, a simple cardboard box containing one meal, would prove more effective at destroying German will to fight than many conventional weapons, because hunger defeats ideology, and America had conquered hunger for its soldiers, while Germany starved its own. The philosophy of feeding armies. The fundamental difference between American and German approaches to feeding soldiers reflected their broader military philosophies and industrial realities. For Germany, food, like ammunition, fuel, and equipment, was a scarce resource to be carefully rationed and conserved. For America, food was an industrial product to be manufactured in abundance and distributed freely. German military rations in 1945 bore little resemblance to the substantial meals provided in 1939. The standard German field ration had deteriorated along with Germany's fortunes. What began as adequate nutrition, bread, meat, vegetables, and coffee, had devolved into a desperate collection of ersatz substitutes and increasingly meager portions. By 1945, a typical German soldier's daily ration consisted of 700 grams of bread, often made with sawdust filler, 120 grams of meat, usually horse meat or processed scraps, 45 grams of ersatz coffee, made from roasted acorns or barley, 25 grams of artificial honey, synthesized from coal, occasional vegetables when available, usually turnips or beets, and little else. This provided approximately 1,800 calories daily, barely enough to sustain a sedentary person, wholly inadequate for soldiers conducting combat operations. The nutritional quality was equally poor. The bread was heavy and hard to digest. The ersatz coffee had no nutritional value and tasted like burnt bark. The artificial honey contained no actual sugar, just coal-derived sweetener that provided energy but tasted chemical. More critically, this was the official allocation, what soldiers were supposed to receive. In reality, by early 1945, many German units were receiving half rations or less. Supply lines were disrupted by Allied bombing and advancing armies. Transport networks had collapsed. Food production in Germany had been decimated by the diversion of agricultural workers to military service and the loss of conquered territories that had supplied food. German soldiers were literally starving while fighting. Medical records from German military hospitals in 1945 show widespread malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, and diseases associated with inadequate nutrition. Soldiers suffered from beriberi, scurvy, and other ailments that hadn't been seen in European armies since the Middle Ages. American rations, by contrast, were designed by nutritionists, mass-produced by food companies, and distributed with the same industrial efficiency that moved ammunition and fuel. The U.S. military recognized that well-fed soldiers fought better, recovered faster from wounds, maintained morale more effectively, and resisted disease more successfully than malnourished troops. The K ration, introduced in 1942, represented this philosophy in concentrated form. Developed by physiologist Ancel Keys, the K ration was designed to provide complete nutrition in a portable, durable package that could sustain soldiers during combat operations where hot meals were impossible. Each K ration box, breakfast, dinner, or supper, contained approximately 1,200 calories of carefully selected foods: canned meat, ham and eggs, processed meat or cheese, crackers or biscuits, fruit bar, candy-coated chocolate discs, instant coffee or drink powder, sugar tablets, cigarettes, chewing gum, and toilet paper. 3K rations daily provided 3,600 calories, adequate for combat operations. More importantly, the food was real. The ham was actual ham from American pigs. The chocolate was real chocolate made from cocoa. The coffee was ground from actual coffee beans. The cheese was made from milk. Everything was genuine food, not ersatz substitutes. The C ration, developed earlier, was even more substantial. Each C ration can contained a complete meal:
meat and vegetables in various combinations, beef stew, meat and beans, ham and lima beans, bread or biscuits, dessert, fruit, pudding or cake, and accessories. A single C ration provided 1,500 calories of filling, tasty food. The psychological impact of this food abundance extended beyond mere nutrition. American soldiers knew their country valued them enough to provide quality food. They fought knowing they would eat well regardless of battlefield situation. This knowledge contributed to morale, confidence, and determination.
German soldiers, conversely, knew their nation couldn't feed them adequately. This knowledge undermined morale, created doubt about leadership competence, and contributed to the growing sense that Germany was losing because it lacked the resources to sustain the war. The ersatz catastrophe. The German reliance on ersatz, substitute, products revealed the bankruptcy of their war economy by 1945. Unable to import or produce sufficient genuine foodstuffs, German industry created substitutes that were nutritionally inadequate and psychologically demoralizing. Ersatz coffee, made from roasted acorns, chicory, or barley, contained no caffeine and minimal nutrients. It was hot and brown, but it wasn't coffee. Soldiers who had drunk real coffee before the war recognized it as a poor imitation. Those who had never tasted real coffee accepted it as normal until they captured American rations and tasted actual coffee. The contrast was devastating. American instant coffee, made from real coffee beans through a spray drying process, provided genuine coffee flavor, caffeine for alertness, and the psychological comfort of a hot drink. German ersatz coffee provided only warmth and bitterness. Artificial honey, synthesized from coal derivatives through German chemical processes, represented a triumph of industrial chemistry, but a failure as food. It was sweet, but the sweetness came from saccharin and other artificial sweeteners. It had no nutritional value, no vitamins, no minerals. It was just sweetness in a form that tasted vaguely chemical. American soldiers received real honey in some rations, or real sugar, or corn syrup, all actual food products with genuine nutritional value. The difference wasn't just taste, but substance. American soldiers were being fed real nutrition. German soldiers were being given chemical imitations. The bread situation was even worse. German military bread by 1945 contained increasing amounts of sawdust, ground straw, and other cellulose fillers to stretch limited flour supplies. The resulting product was heavy, hard to digest, and provided minimal nutrition per weight. Soldiers complained that eating German bread was like eating wood, which, technically, it partially was. American bread in rations was made from real wheat flour. The crackers in K rations were simple but genuine grain products. The hardtack biscuits in C rations were traditional food, not industrial filler. American soldiers were eating food. German soldiers were eating materials that happened to be edible. The meat situation revealed the starkest contrast. German soldiers by 1945 were receiving horse meat, not because horse meat is inherently bad, but because horses were being slaughtered out of desperation as cattle were no longer available. The horse meat was often of poor quality, processed from draft horses worked to exhaustion before slaughter. American soldiers received canned ham, beef, chicken, and turkey processed from animals raised specifically for food. The quality was consistent, the nutrition substantial, and the taste acceptable. More importantly, there was enough. American soldiers weren't wondering if they would eat. They were complaining about which variety of sea ration they had to eat that day. This difference created profound psychological effects. German soldiers knew they were receiving inferior food because their nation couldn't provide better. American soldiers knew they were receiving genuine food because their nation had abundance to spare. The mental impact of this knowledge was as important as the nutritional difference. The first encounters, North Africa. German forces first captured American rations in significant quantities during the North African campaign in 1942-1943. The initial German reaction mixed curiosity with skepticism. These rations seemed too abundant, too well packaged, too complete. Surely this was propaganda, designed to demoralize German troops by showing abundance that didn't actually exist throughout the American military. Oberst Friedrich Weber, Chief of Staff for the 21st Panzer Division, examined captured American rations after the Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943. His report, preserved in captured German documents, revealed the German interpretation. American rations demonstrate their propaganda approach to warfare. The packages are designed for psychological effect rather than practical nutrition. The abundance of packaging, variety of items, and inclusion of luxury goods, cigarettes, candy, and chewing gum, suggests these are special rations provided to frontline units for morale purposes and possible capture by enemy forces. We do not assess that typical American soldiers receive such rations routinely. This assessment was completely wrong, but it reflected German inability to comprehend American industrial capacity. In German experience, such abundant rations would indeed be propaganda items. Germany couldn't afford to provide such food to all soldiers, so they assumed America couldn't either. German soldiers who actually ate the captured American rations reached different conclusions. Gefreiter Hans Becker, 10th Panzer Division, wrote in a letter home that was intercepted by Allied censors, "We captured American supplies yesterday. The food is incredible. Real chocolate, real coffee, real meat. I haven't eaten this well since before the war. The Americans give this food to every soldier, or so they say. If this is true, they have resources we cannot imagine. If this is propaganda, it is very convincing propaganda." German medical officers noticed that soldiers who consumed captured American rations showed improved health markers, better energy, improved wound healing, higher morale. This contradicted the official assessment that American rations were propaganda. If they were just propaganda, they shouldn't actually improve soldiers' health and performance. But the narrative that American rations were propaganda persisted in German command channels because the alternative, that America could actually provide such abundance to all troops, was too demoralizing to accept. Admitting that the enemy could feed its soldiers better than Germany fed its own soldiers would undermine the entire propaganda narrative of German superiority. The Italian Revelation. The Italian campaign from 1943 to 1945 provided sustained exposure to American food abundance. German soldiers defending Italy encountered American rations regularly as they captured supply dumps, found abandoned positions, or took them from American prisoners and casualties. The accumulation of experience gradually eroded the propaganda explanation.
Too many German soldiers had eaten American rations. Too many had noticed their own rations deteriorating. Too many had observed the physical condition of American prisoners compared to German troops. Obergefreiter Wilhelm Schmidt, captured at Anzio in May 1944, provided testimony during interrogation that revealed the German soldiers' growing understanding. "We were told American rations were propaganda, but I ate American food many times. It was always the same: good quality, real ingredients, substantial portions. After a while you realize this cannot be propaganda. This is their normal food. They feed their soldiers well because they can afford to. We cannot afford to feed our soldiers well, so we tell ourselves the enemy's food is propaganda to make ourselves feel better about starving." The comparison with Italian rations was equally revealing. Italian soldiers before Italy's surrender in September 1943 had received rations similar to German soldiers, adequate but austere, real food but limited portions. After Italy switched sides and Italian service units began working with Allied forces, Italian soldiers received American rations. They immediately recognized the difference and began questioning why they had fought alongside Germans whose nation couldn't feed them as well as the Americans could. German soldiers observed this and drew their own conclusions. If Italian soldiers, former allies, were now eating better under American supply than they had under German alliance, what did that say about Germany's ability to sustain the war? The medical impact became undeniable. German soldiers in Italy were suffering increasing malnutrition by late 1944. American prisoners held by Germans often arrived in better physical condition than their guards, a reversal of normal prisoner-guard health dynamics that didn't go unnoticed by German soldiers. Stabsarzt, medical captain, Friedrich Bauer, serving with the 94th Infantry Division in Italy, filed medical reports documenting the deteriorating health of German troops. By December 1944, he noted, "Vitamin deficiency diseases are becoming common. Soldiers show signs of scurvy, beriberi, and general malnutrition. Physical stamina has declined noticeably. Wound healing is slower than normal. These are symptoms of inadequate nutrition sustained over months. Contrast this with American prisoners who, despite being held
in less than ideal conditions, maintained better physical condition than many of our guards. The implication is obvious, but cannot be stated officially. The enemy feeds its soldiers better than we feed ours." Normandy and the Western Front. The opening of the Western Front in June 1944 brought German forces into sustained contact with American supply systems operating at peak efficiency. The abundance of American supplies, particularly food, became impossible to dismiss as propaganda. German soldiers defending Normandy encountered American rations in every captured position, every destroyed vehicle, every battlefield where Americans had operated. The volume was overwhelming. German forces accustomed to careful rationing discovered that Americans sometimes left rations behind during withdrawals or advances, an inconceivable waste by German standards.
Oberst Ernst von Luck, commanding Panzer Grenadier Regiment 125, described an incident in July 1944. "During a counterattack, we overran an American position that had been abandoned hastily. We discovered boxes of rations left behind, perhaps 200 individual meal packages. This represented more food than my regiment had received in the past week. The Americans had simply abandoned it, presumably because carrying it would slow their withdrawal. We distributed the food to our men, who ate better that day than they had in months. But the psychological impact was devastating. Our soldiers immediately understood that an army which can abandon such quantities of food possesses resources we cannot match." The German soldiers' letters home from this period reflect growing awareness of the food disparity. Censored letters captured after various battles show consistent themes. The Americans eat better than we did in peacetime. Their rations contain chocolate, coffee, cigarettes, luxuries we haven't seen in years. They give this food to every soldier. How can we defeat an enemy who can afford such waste? I captured an American ration box today. It contained more food than I receive in 3 days. The food was good, real meat, real chocolate. We are told we fight for a superior civilization, but our civilization cannot feed its soldiers while theirs can. What does this mean? Our officers say American abundance is propaganda, but I have eaten their food many times. It is always good, always plentiful. This is not propaganda, this is their reality. We are losing because they have everything and we have nothing. German censors noted the morale impact of these observations. A September 1944 security report warned, "Soldiers' exposure to enemy rations is causing significant morale problems. Men are beginning to question official narratives about enemy weakness and German superiority. The contrast between our rations and captured enemy rations is too obvious to dismiss with propaganda explanations. Recommend increased security measures regarding discussion of enemy rations and stricter punishment for defeatist talk regarding food supplies." But repression couldn't eliminate reality. German soldiers knew they were hungry. They knew American soldiers were well fed, and increasingly they knew what this disparity meant for the war's outcome. The Battle of the Bulge, hunger versus abundance. Hitler's Ardennes offensive in December 1944 provided the starkest demonstration of the food disparity's tactical impact. German forces attacked with troops who had been on reduced rations for months. American forces they encountered were well fed and well supplied. The German offensive achieved initial surprise, but logistics, including food, became critical within days. German units captured American supply dumps and discovered abundance that shocked even veterans of the Eastern Front who thought they had seen everything. Obergefreiter Kurt Zimmermann, 12th SS Panzer Division, described capturing an American supply dump near Bastogne. "We found warehouses full of food, pallets of ration boxes stacked to the ceiling, chocolate bars by the thousand, coffee by the barrel, canned meat in quantities we couldn't estimate. We had been on half rations for weeks. Many of us had not eaten in 24 hours. Seeing such abundance, knowing it was normal supply for the Americans, broke something in us. We realized we were fighting an enemy who had so much food they could stockpile it in forward areas while we were starving." The 101st Airborne Division, surrounded at Bastogne, was supplied by airdrop. Among the supplies dropped were rations, parachute loads of K rations and C rations to feed the surrounded troops. German forces surrounding Bastogne, many of whom hadn't received rations in days, could see parachutes dropping food to the Americans they were supposedly besieging. The psychological impact was devastating. German soldiers knew that surrounded American forces were eating better than they were. The inversion of expected logistics, besieged forces better supplied than besiegers, demonstrated American resource superiority in the most direct possible way. Private First Class Felix Sparks, defending Bastogne, later wrote, "We were surrounded, supposedly cut off from supply, but we ate better than we had during the advance across France. The Air Corps dropped rations along with ammunition. We had hot coffee every morning, chocolate bars for energy, and decent meals from C rations. Meanwhile, German prisoners we captured were skeletons, clearly malnourished and amazed at our food. They couldn't understand how we could eat so well while surrounded." German soldiers captured during the Bulge consistently mentioned food in their interrogations. American intelligence reports compiled these observations. Prisoners uniformly note superior American rations.
Many state they surrendered partially due to hunger and the knowledge that American captivity would provide better food than German service. Multiple prisoners indicate that awareness of American food abundance contributed to declining morale and will to fight. One prisoner stated, "You cannot defeat an enemy who eats chocolate while you starve. The war was lost when we realized you had abundance and we had nothing." The final collapse, spring 1945. By March 1945, German rations had become catastrophically inadequate. Many units received no rations for days at a time. Soldiers foraged, stole from civilians, and starved. The contrast with American forces, now operating deep in Germany itself, was impossible to ignore. German civilians witnessed American soldiers eating rations that exceeded anything Germans had seen since before the war. German prisoners received food from American stocks that was better than German civilians were eating. The visibility of American abundance undermined remaining German will to resist. Oberst Hans von Luck, by then commanding battle groups in the final defense of Germany, described the situation in April 1945. "My men were starving. We received no rations for a week. Some soldiers were eating grass and tree bark. When we encountered American forces, many of my men surrendered not because they feared combat, but because they knew Americans would feed them. I could not blame them. How can you ask men to fight when they are starving and the enemy is well fed? The food situation alone would have ended the war even without military defeat." German soldiers surrendering in the final months consistently reported that hunger was a primary factor in their decision to give up. American prison camps provided meals that German soldiers described as the best food they had eaten in years. The irony was bitter. Enemy captivity provided better nutrition than service in the German military. Medical examinations of German prisoners in April 1945 revealed systemic malnutrition. The average German soldier had lost 20 to 30 pounds from his pre-war weight. Many showed signs of vitamin deficiencies, including scurvy and beriberi, diseases that had been eliminated in modern armies but returned under conditions of extreme deprivation. American soldiers, by contrast, often gained weight during their service. The 4,000-plus calorie daily ration, combined with youth and physical activity, built strong, healthy soldiers. The physical contrast between German and American troops in the final months was stark. Gaunt, malnourished Germans facing robust, well-fed Americans. The prisoner experience. German prisoners of war held in American custody experienced the food disparity most directly. They were fed from American military rations, the same food American soldiers ate. For most German prisoners, this represented the best nutrition they had received in years. The Geneva Convention required that prisoners receive rations equivalent to the captor nation's troops. America complied, providing German POWs with American military rations. The quantity and quality shocked German prisoners who had spent years on declining German rations. Obergefreiter Klaus Hartmann, captured in Bavaria in April 1945, described his first meal in American captivity. "They gave us the same rations American soldiers ate. I received a box, K-ration they called it. It contained meat, crackers, chocolate, coffee, candy, and cigarettes. More food than I had eaten in a week of German service. Better quality than anything we had received in 2 years. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, and realized that everything we had been told about America was wrong. They weren't weak, they weren't starving. They had abundance we couldn't comprehend." German prisoners held at camps in the United States experienced even greater contrast. They received 3 hot meals daily, supplemented by PX privileges, where they could purchase additional food with wages earned from labor.
German prisoners in American camps often gained weight, a reversal so stark that it became a source of dark humor among prisoners. Letters from German prisoners to families in Germany consistently described the food abundance. These letters, censored by American authorities, were allowed to contain descriptions of food because the information served Allied psychological warfare purposes. Germans learning that their captured soldiers were eating better as prisoners than German civilians were eating at home contributed to declining German morale. Gefreiter Wilhelm Schmidt wrote to his family from a camp in Texas, "I work on the farm here. We receive 3 meals daily, real eggs for breakfast, meat for lunch, vegetables and bread for dinner. The Americans feed us better than we fed ourselves when we occupied France. I have gained 10 kilos since capture. My health has never been better. Tell mother I am eating well. I wish I could send you food, but it is not permitted. Perhaps after the war, I will stay here where there is food." The mathematical reality. The production statistics behind American rations revealed industrial capacity that Germany couldn't match. The U.S. food industry, converted to military production, produced rations at scales that defied German comprehension. Wrigley's Chewing Gum Company alone produced 630 million pieces of gum monthly for military rations. Hershey's Chocolate Company produced 24 million ration bars weekly. The Quartermaster Corps managed contracts with over 1,000 food processing companies producing various ration components.
Total American ration production exceeded 5 billion rations during the war, enough to feed 12 million soldiers for over a year. The production included 500 million pounds of canned meat, 200 million pounds of processed cheese, 1 billion pounds of sugar products, 300 million pounds of coffee, and 2 billion cigarettes monthly for rations. This production occurred while American civilians maintained better diets than most European populations even during rationing. American food abundance allowed military rations without significant civilian sacrifice, a feat Germany couldn't replicate. German ration production declined throughout the war. By 1945, German military ration production had fallen to perhaps 20% of 1939 levels. Quality declined even faster than quantity as substitutes replaced genuine ingredients. The industrial capacity simply didn't exist to feed German forces adequately while maintaining civilian nutrition and continuing war production. The calorie mathematics told the story starkly. American soldier daily caloric intake, 4,000 to 4,500 calories. German soldier daily caloric intake, 1945, 1,500 to 2,000 calories. Difference, 2,500 calories daily. Over a year, this difference accumulated to over 900,000 calories, equivalent to 250 pounds of body weight. American soldiers were receiving enough nutrition to maintain peak physical condition. German soldiers were slowly starving while fighting. The psychological weapon. American commanders recognized that rations served psychological as well as nutritional purposes. Well-fed soldiers fought better, but knowledge of American abundance also demoralized enemy forces. Psychological warfare units deliberately left rations in positions they abandoned, knowing German soldiers would find them. They dropped ration packages over German lines, demonstrating American abundance. They ensured captured German soldiers were photographed eating American rations, then distributed these photos showing German soldiers well-fed in American captivity. The strategy worked. German soldiers increasingly surrendered knowing they would eat better as prisoners. The ultimate defeat, when enemy captivity becomes preferable to service in your own military, was achieved partly through food. General Dwight Eisenhower understood this. In a March 1945 memo, he wrote, "Our superior rations contribute significantly to morale advantage over enemy forces. German soldiers know they are malnourished while we are well-fed. This knowledge undermines their will to fight. Recommend continued emphasis on ration quality and quantity as component of overall psychological warfare strategy." The effectiveness of this psychological warfare was documented in prisoner interrogations. American intelligence officers compiled statistics showing that approximately 40% of German prisoners cited food shortages as a factor in their decision to surrender. When asked what surprised them most about American forces, over 60% mentioned food abundance. One German officer, whose name was redacted from interrogation reports, provided perhaps the most complete explanation. "You defeated us with many weapons, but among the most effective was food. You fed your soldiers well, we starved ours. You demonstrated abundance, we demonstrated poverty. Your soldiers fought, knowing they would eat well regardless of circumstances. Our soldiers fought knowing they might starve even if victorious. This difference in knowledge, that you had abundance and we had scarcity, was as important as any tactical or strategic advantage. A well-fed army will always defeat a starving army given equal courage and training. Your rations were not just food. They were proof of industrial superiority we couldn't match." The civil dimension. The German civilian population witnessed the food disparity as American forces advanced into Germany. American soldiers, even while fighting, ate better than German civilians who hadn't seen combat. This demonstration of abundance contributed to German civilian acceptance of occupation. German children who had never tasted chocolate received chocolate bars from American soldiers. German women who had cooked with ersatz ingredients for years observed American field kitchens using real coffee, real sugar, real meat. The contrast was undeniable and crushing. Some German civilians attempted to trade valuables for American rations. Family heirlooms, jewelry, artwork, items that might have bought a week's food on the German black market, were offered for a single American K ration. This inversion of values, priceless heirlooms for a cardboard box of military food, demonstrated how completely food scarcity had broken German society. American commanders strictly forbade trading rations to German civilians, but soldiers often gave rations to children or elderly civilians they encountered. These acts of casual generosity, giving away food that America could easily replace, demonstrated abundance in the most direct way possible. Frau Marguerite Snyder, whose diary of the final months of the war was published in 1947, described an encounter with American soldiers in April 1945. "They gave my children chocolate, real chocolate, not the ersatz trash we had been eating. My children had never tasted real chocolate. They were born after rationing began. They thought chocolate was brown paste made from artificial sweetener. When they tasted American chocolate, they cried. So did I. Not just because of the chocolate, but because we realized what we had lost, what we had never had, what we could never have under the system we had supported." The strategic impact. Military historians assessing World War II's outcome consistently identify logistics as decisive. Among logistical factors, food often receives less attention than fuel, ammunition, or equipment, but food's impact on combat effectiveness was profound and measurable. Well-nourished soldiers recovered from wounds faster, resisted disease better, maintained morale more effectively, and performed physically demanding tasks better than malnourished soldiers. The 2,500-calorie daily advantage American soldiers enjoyed over German soldiers translated directly into combat performance advantages. Studies conducted by the U.S. Army Medical Corps during and after the war demonstrated that soldiers receiving adequate nutrition, 4,000+ calories daily, showed 30% better physical endurance, 25% faster wound healing, 40% better resistance to disease, significantly better morale and mental acuity. German soldiers receiving inadequate nutrition, 1,500 to 2,000 calories, showed declining performance across all metrics. By 1945, German soldier effectiveness was significantly degraded by malnutrition independent of other factors. The strategic calculation was simple. America could produce enough food to maintain peak soldier performance. Germany couldn't. This difference, multiplied across millions of soldiers over years of war, represented a strategic advantage as important as any weapon system. The post-war reckoning. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the full extent of civilian and military malnutrition became visible. Medical examinations of German civilians and former soldiers revealed systemic malnutrition affecting entire populations. American occupation forces faced the challenge of feeding millions of malnourished Germans.
The irony was profound. American military rations, which had been psychological weapons during the war, now became humanitarian tools feeding former enemies. Klaus Hartmann, the soldier who had eaten his first K ration in April 1945, survived the war and later wrote about his experience. "I fought for Germany for 5 years. I believed in victory until almost the end. But when I tasted American rations and realized they fed all their soldiers this well, I knew we had lost before the war began." You cannot defeat an enemy who can feed its armies better than you can feed your generals. The K ration box I opened in April 1945 taught me more about American power than all the battles I had fought. It contained proof that we were fighting an industrial colossus beyond our comprehension. The chocolate bar and coffee in that box defeated Nazi ideology more completely than any propaganda could have. The lesson of World War II rations extends beyond that conflict. In modern military operations, logistics, including food, remains critical. The principle established in 1945 persists. Well-fed soldiers fight better, and the nation that can feed its forces adequately possesses a strategic advantage that no amount of tactical brilliance can overcome. The German soldiers who dismissed American rations as propaganda learned the truth through direct experience. And that truth was devastating. America had won the war before it began because American industrial capacity could provide abundance that Germany could never match. The C ration wasn't propaganda, it was proof of victory.